Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Betsperts Golf, where we'll be discussing some DFS nonsense today with my good friend Ron Klos. How are you doing today, sir?
Doing well. You and I both had a pretty interesting week last week. I was moving a family of eight, three pets included, cross country from Texas back to my home state of Michigan. So it's been pretty crazy over here. I did get to attend the final round of the Rocket Mortgage on Sunday, and it was a fun time. Just watching certain guys. You have a few head-to-head bets on, for example, Max Homa over Henrik Norlander, and it came down to the very last hole when
Oh,
Max
wow.
put his approach shot to 2 feet, and so I got that one. So that was fun. And you apparently traversed almost every square foot of Iowa, or am I missing something? Maybe not that much, but tell us about your little excursion there.
Yeah, it was quite funny that you and I were both missioning all the way over to Michigan because I went from West Iowa to East Iowa over a 7 day stint and managed to cover 430 miles on my bicycle, self powered. And I was sitting to sell in the lobby, and it was enjoyable. I don't know how, but it was. So he was asking me how that's even fun and why I did it, but I still don't know why I did it, but it turned out to be a good time, and I thoroughly enjoyed the week away. And while I was gone, I had my Cam Smith polo come in, and I bought that after we cashed him at the Open, and life's good. Back in the saddle again, and looking forward to a fun week. So now that we've both got the crazy crazies behind us. So
Yep. There's something about
yes,
road trips. I think just road trips in general, whether you're on a bike, sometimes just seeing new parts of whether your state, the country, I think it's just different. You unplug, you get away from technology. It's just get out in nature. So definitely can feel where you're coming from with that.
oh yeah, we had a few days where it was 3 days I didn't even have internet, so it was just perfect. You don't even have to check your phone because you just know you don't have service. So 15,000 people in a small town is just no joke for the internet providers. So it was a good time. But anyway, let's get to business here and let's chat about the Wyndham Classic, Wyndham Championship this week. We've got a interesting field. We've got a lot of guys that are horses for the course, and I think it's going to be fun navigating them this week. I know you've got a few interesting tidbits you want to share with us. I think we got some player quotes from you.
Yeah. So this week, this is one of those, I call them conviction courses. It's just one of the strongest course history tracks on the tour. And when you go through the list of guys we're going to get through here, like there's an entire gaggle of just course fit players. And you look at the past winners, Kisner, Poston, Simpson, Brandt Snedeker, Patrick Reed. They kind of all fit this specific recipe for success here. And for me, it just kind of comes down to three things. Obviously, you got to hit fairways. You have these, since it's a shorter course, you have a lot of shorter irons and wedges into these greens. And now these greens are a little different than last week at the Rocket Mortgage. These are very complex, tricky Bermuda surfaces, a lot of sloping, a lot of undulations. Of course, Donald Ross course here. And so kind of looking at players who fit those three criteria. And yeah, looking back at some of these quotes from players who have played here in the past, you know, it's amazing that those three themes just pop up in every interview. For example, Jim Herman, who won a couple of years ago, said you've got to be below the hole when you're putting. If you're above the hole, you're going to be lagging putts all day. Brandt Snedeker, guys who wedge and putted better tend to do very well here. Henrik Stenson didn't use driver the entire week when he won. And so his whole thing was, trying to stay out of the Bermuda rough. If you do that, you have pretty short clubs and you can be accurate with your second shots. And then he goes into, it's basically 8, 9 irons and wedges into these greens. And because of the heat in North Carolina here, they have to continually water these greens. And so these greens are ultra receptive. And so I think that's another reason you see a green in regulation percentage, the highest on tour at 74%. Luke Donald goes into how, these greens are very true, very fast, very undulating. You have to have imagination. And I keep reading that imagination, creativity on these greens. And so, it's not just going to be a putting contest. I think you're going to have experienced, and you talked about this, experienced Bermuda putters, guys who, obviously we'll get to a guy like Denny McCarthy, who, they are really good on this surface. And even guys who have played here, guys who have not been here before, I think that course history, that's a reason why it matters so much, is some of these guys just know the greens, better than others.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think it's an interesting dynamic how those three things fit into each other. If you're not hitting fairways, you're going to be hitting out of that. It's not very penal Bermuda rough, but like you said, these greens are very receptive, very undulating, very complex. If you don't have that control out of the rough like you would have from the fairway, you can be finding yourself on the wrong side of the hole, like Luke said, or Jim. If you're above the hole, you're not going to have a good birdie look. You're going to be struggling to kind of take a run at them. So that's going to be an interesting thing to see, and I think that's pretty obvious this week. I think the how we're going to get different is going to be peculiar. You're going to have to really take some gambles on some guys because I think there's some obvious plays this week that a lot of people are going to go to, and it's one of those. So I don't know. I think I saw a little tweet from you that had the 3-putt percentage on this at this venue is one of the highest on tour, and yeah.
Yeah, pretty much every putting stat, like when you go across the board, if you're looking at even just one putt percentage, it is the lowest one putt percentage on tour at only 34%. And so just even from distance, like from 20 plus feet, it's difficult here. And so I think that's kind of maybe more than any other week, I'm really focusing on putters. Obviously Bermuda is a different surface than, what we've had recently. So I think that's going to really matter this week, like you said.
Absolutely. I think it's going to be fascinating, especially going from the Poa Bend, mixture that we had last week. And like we said, it's the final event before the playoffs. So there's some guys that have their tour cards on the line. And if they can nut up, they're going to be, inside the top 125. And hopefully they can make it into the playoffs and keep their card. There's going to be some guys that are going to be disappointed. So it's a fun narrative to go down, Ron. How are you feeling about that one this week?
Yeah, so that's always an interesting discussion to me because, you talk about motivation. Is that a thing in golf? And you look at, if you compare it to other sports, like football, football's full of emotion. You can emotionally kind of charge yourself up for a bigger game. Basketball the same way, but golf, it's so technical. Like you're worried about your swing. There's so many other variables. It's already the toughest sport. And so, other than maybe you're preparing a little harder, maybe you and your caddy are on the course, you're taking it to the next level as far as your preparation. But, I just don't really buy into the whole, because you're motivated, you're going to play better. I just don't think that really fits with golf. You have any take on that or?
No, I totally agree. I think if you've wanted to play well, you should have done that already this year. Unless you're a massive procrastinator and like to cut it tight, but I don't think that even that helps that much because you're going to have to win the damn thing in order to really salvage a bad season. So it's an interesting week, and we've got an interesting field. We've got Will Zalatoris, Webb Simpson, Shane Lowry, Sung Jae Im, and Billy Horschel covering the top 10, the 10K range here. And it's looking like the ownership is kind of shaking down to the bottom of that range with Sung Jae Im and Billy Horschel garnering the majority of that there, along with some Shane Lowry. We've got a very expensive Willie Z and then a Webb Simpson who's entering a course that he plays fantastically well at, yet his current form is about as garbage as he's ever had entering this venue. So there's some big decisions to be made at the top here. I think it's going to be an interesting scenario with Webb. I've been listening to a few podcasts as well already, and it seems like a lot of people are fading him. So it's going to be interesting to monitor his ownership because there's going to be a certain point where if he gets into the lower single digits as a Webb Simpson at, the Wyndham, what are we going to do? So what are you doing at the top here, Ron?
So when you look at the top two guys, I think we'll start with Zalatoris here. He basically had one great round in Detroit. He really didn't put it all together until that last round. And I just think similar to the Detroit Golf Club, don't think this is a good fit for him. This course, with the tricky greens, with the sloping. And we've all seen the numbers, how good he has putted in these major events. Okay, but he's still in these minor events, and I don't know what that is yet. I would assume not enough sample size to go on yet with that. But, I just don't think you can pay that high of a price for him. And again, he has played here a lot. He played here, he said around 20 times when he was in college. So he has the course history angle as far as, playing it. But again, he's a guy who I'm going to focus on when it's difficult conditions, major type events. And so I just don't think it's smart to pay that premium. Now, again, if you're going strictly on ownership, like you said, he's pretty low right now. Then we go down to Webb. Now, Webb, this is the conundrum, because I think if Webb was in the 8 or 9K range, that I think his percentage would obviously be a lot higher. But I watched him up close in Detroit, and he just could not get anything consistently going. Like, when you look at his opening round there, he shot a 66. He was +1 the last 3 rounds on that course. Like, guys were shooting 65s with ease, and he just could not get it done. He's lost tee to green in 3 straight. This is his worst year putting on the green since 2016. And so kind of when you combine all these things, when you factor in the price, I think this, and I'm a Webb guy. Like, I have played him probably more than anybody on tour. And the price is ridiculous to me. Even the betting odds, the course history and the fit is all built in, and it's just, I can't do it. And so for me, Shane Lowry, and even more for me, Sungjae Im. Sungjae 3 for 3 with 2 top 10s here. He's never shot over par here ever. He had issues with his putting stroke that apparently he sent a lot of video back and forth with his coaches, and he's fixed that. The 3M, he was runner-up. He kind of always plays well in these classical tree-line courses, and so I think Sungjae is for sure my favorite play. Shane Lowry's just been there every week. Like, I don't think you can go wrong with playing him. I think if his ownership around 15% right now, if it gets higher, I think he's another good chalky player that you can kind of take that chalk.
Yeah.
And so those, Lowry and him are my definite top 2 up here.
Yeah, I'd say those bottom 3, Shane, Sungjae, and Billy, just depending on how ownership shakes out, I'll probably land up playing 2 of those guys. My model likes all 3 of them. There's no deciphering between the 2 of them, all 3 of them. They've all got pretty good course history at this venue. They've all got that same statistical profile, very good ball strikers. Shane's putter's been a bit of a problem lately, but we know any moment it can just change on a dime. So there's a lot to be, hopeful and hope that these guys can really get it together for us at the top. Yeah. And it's going to be interesting. I'm definitely going to keep an eye on Webb. It's a very, very peculiar situation. And I think the industry is a very sharp industry. And I think a lot of people are realizing that he's overpriced. He might be over-owned. And then all of a sudden we've got a Webb Simpson that's 5%. But it could also go the other way. So
he has, just really quick, he has had times when he's been struggling and he's come in here and he's finished top 5. So,
yeah,
you can look past the form maybe because he's done it before. And so, yeah, if he gets down into the single digits, my opinion might change. And so, yeah, that's really interesting to watch here over the next day or so.
Yeah, definitely lower digit ownership there, I think, is going to be the only reason we go to Webb. And then we've got Russell Henley, Corey Connors, Tyrrell Hatton, Adam Scott, and Harry V, the third, in this 9K range. And it's going to be an interesting one here too, because Russell Henley leads it off, and it looks like him and Corey Connors are going to be the 2 majority-owned guys at the top of that range. Rightfully so. I've got them ranked 2 and 3 in my model, so it's making a lot of sense for me to go to that direction. And if I'm wanting to pivot off of one of them, I'm thinking I'm going to lean towards Corey Connors, who's looking slightly cheaper, a little less owned than Russell. He's also been putting fantastically well lately. Corey Connors has completely switched around his putter. He's top 30 in the field over the last 24 rounds, and he's an okay Bermuda putter too. He doesn't necessarily have that much of a difference between, his baseline putting and what goes on in Bermuda. So, yeah, give me your thoughts at the top of this range, and who you think who you're gonna be going with this week.
So this is another week. It's similar to I think the last show we did at the 3M, where you got a lot of guys here in this range that you love, and that ownership's going to be high, and you're just going to have to find a way to get different, kind of more towards the bottom. Because yeah, like you said, I love Henley and Connors. Henley was leading here throughout the first 3 rounds last year, and so is this his Sedgefield redemption year? How strong is the scar tissue from last year? And I will say this, he looked really good on Sunday. He's another guy I followed when I was at Detroit. His ball striking is really top notch right now, and it's always been that way. But he was really dialed in. And another thing to look at is he's fresh. When I looked at his game log, Detroit was his first non-major event in the last 12 weeks. So he hasn't played much at all. And so it's almost like he's gearing up for the FedEx Cup run here. And so, he got some momentum last week. And, a lot of these other guys, they've been playing almost every week. And so I think he's going to be a guy just from a freshness standpoint. That's another variable I like to look at that, really appeals to me. And then Corey Connors, like you said, when you look at his strokes gained putting, those numbers continue to trend up. And even more importantly, Bermuda is his best surface.
Yeah.
He's an elite ball striker. And again, with the whole idea here, you have these narrow kind of tree line fairways, some dog legs. When you look at the numbers, and, I was somewhat shocked to look at off the tee. He's actually gained strokes off the tee in 35 of his last 36 events. So, he is so consistent.
So consistent.
And he's not a distance guy either. So he's getting that done just with accuracy. And so that's exactly what you want here. Of course, everybody knows how good of a ball striker he is with his irons into these greens. And so it really comes down to, is he going to make enough putts this week? And so I think he's a great play at 9,600. And so those are my two. And if we want to go just the next guy below here, Tyrrell Hatton, coming in single digits right now, he may be a guy that I turn to just based on kind of win equity, his ability, as a world-class player to come in here. And I look at birdie or better over the last 24 rounds, he's first in the field. Now, obviously fairways are a tough issue for him at times. And so I do worry about him off the tee a little bit. But I don't see a lot of people going to him. And so he kind of, for me, is a guy who I may jump on here a little more.
Yeah, absolutely. He's not, out of the top guys that I have in my model over here in the top of the leaderboard. He's one of the worst, and rightfully he's owned that way too. But he's also not the worst player in the field. He's just not as good as the guys around him and not showing as much current form. Another concern I do have with him, like you mentioned, the off the tee ability, keeping it accurate is a bit of a concern for him. And he's, there's going to be 60% of shots are going to happen from 125 to 200 yards this week. So I'm kind of weighting a lot of my proximity numbers around that yardage, and he's one of the worst in the top of the board when it comes to that distance. So a lot of people understand why he's probably not going to play that well this week. But again, if you got him and Webb in a lineup, you are just completely different already. And it's an interesting thing. We're not here picking the best players, we're picking the best play. So it's something you have to bear in mind. And, maybe you go with one of them if your risk tolerance is not quite there. But yeah, it's an interesting situation, especially, I'm kind of liking Adam Scott here, especially with that course history. And Harold Vaughn has been playing fantastic golf. He's coming into this week playing, his irons are sensational right now. A lot of good guys to go to in that range. So it's going to be fun to see how his ownership shakes out.
And here's another thing to keep in mind that I thought about earlier. So Hatton, now this is a course where, like we talked about with Henrik Stenson a few years ago, players do not have to hit driver off the tee here. That's what Hatton struggles with.
Yeah.
But if you look at the numbers, Hatton is one of the best players with his long irons. So, if he's struggling or even if he takes that game plan into this tournament and he's just hitting, maybe some 5 woods, some 2 irons off the tee instead, where he's really good at those, I think that's another thing to keep in mind here is that these guys who are not good hitting the fairway, if they club down, okay, that should help them here. And that's why I think another reason for me, Hatton is a really good play. And even Adam Scott, I'm not going to be on him this week, but he's another guy who struggles with fairways, even though at Detroit, he really turned it on off the tee. So I think that's another thing to keep in mind here is with some of these bigger hitters who I'm going to fade mostly this week, is that the ability to club down will or should increase accuracy.
Yeah, it's almost like you have to run a separate model just for the bombers so that you don't, include their accuracy stats in the week's projections, because there are people like that, and Tyrrell's got fantastic short game too. So if he can get it clicking on the tee to green side, I think it's going to be a fun week for him. And then we got the 8K range here, Ron. We got Denny, we got Siwoo, we got Kevin Kisner in a Korean Kim sandwich over there, between Siwoo and Tom Kim. Taylor Pendrith, who just finished up at the top of the leaderboard last week after really giving a good run throughout the week. And then Bezzy, Brian Harmon, JT Poston, Aaron Wise, Justin Rose, and Davis Riley round out that range. There's a lot of appealing names in this range, and I'm going to have to really leave some double cheeseburgers on the table because I want to eat them all, but I just don't think I can. There's too many appealing names in this range, especially if I'm going to be only doing 40 lineups, and there's a lot of chalky individuals that we're going to have to dodge. So just off the bat for me, I'm really liking Kisner, especially between Siwoo Kim and Tom Kim, who are both garnering some serious momentum for two different reasons. Because Siwoo is a big course history guy at this venue. I think he's one of the better course history players at this place, and he's also kind of been playing okay lately. And then Tom Kim, on the other hand, has just been playing sensational golf. I have an outright on Tom Kim, so I'll let that be there. And then we've got Kisner, who's also a really good course history guy, who's right in between those two individuals that might be sucking ownership away from him. The ownership has to go somewhere. People have to click a certain name unless they're clicking all three of those guys. But there's so many good names in this range, what they're going to do. So I'm a big fan of Kisner here from that kind of a leverage perspective. He's one of the better ranked golfers in my model. He's a very good Bermuda putter, and he's also been hitting the ball quite nicely entering for Kisner's standards. He's not necessarily a premier ball striker, but he hasn't been playing atrociously lately. So I like to see that from him entering a course that he's played really well at in the past. So those are my guys at the top there. I'm curious as to seeing what you're going to get up to.
Yeah, there's kind of another angle I'm attacking this week is rebound players. So guys who missed the cut last week, even guys who have been struggling that, they're really talented. And there's a big one that we'll get to here at the low 8K range here in a minute. But, Denny McCarthy, Kevin Kisner, both missed the cut last week. Both were favored to do really well. And so, you look at that ownership for both of them, and it's, Denny's coming in around 14% right now, Kisner single digits. So I think those are really two good plays. Obviously, McCarthy, great history here. 4 for 4 made cuts, 3 top 22s here. His current form, with the exception of last week, is also really good. Yeah. And so, yeah, there's a bunch of players in this range where it's kind of the combination of course history, current form, and when you combine those together, and even course fit, those three things. Siwoo Kim, same thing. I mean, his course history here is unbelievable with 4 top 5s. He even was quoted a few years ago, or it might have been last year actually, that this is his favorite course on tour. He was 14th at the Rocket last week. Even with his 3, and he gets kind of a bad rap for being inconsistent, but even with his 3 recent missed cuts, he still made 17 of his last 21 cuts overall. And so I think his consistency has really increased. He's great on Bermuda greens, par 70 courses. So he's definitely probably one of my core plays this week. When you go down, like you said, Kisner, I don't think you can go wrong with him. I really expect him to rebound this week. He's got a 66 scoring average here in his last 8 rounds. So, yeah, like you said, there's just a treasure trove of guys that you could pretty much fill out your whole lineup from this range alone if you wanted to. And you got some win equity here as well. So I think that's a really, really kind of an optional idea if you want to just kind of start with McCarthy, Kim, Kisner. 3 really good plays right there.
Absolutely. And there's a theory that I'm going to roll with as well, is I'm going to kind of like re-engineer how we go about approaching this week with just trying to find good putters that are always good putters, kind of like Kisner, kind of like Christian Bezuidenhout, sometimes like Denny McCarthy. Those are all very, very good putters all the time, but not necessarily the best ball strikers. So if, we've typically always gone with a good ball striker to start off with, and then hopefully his putting can show up. But I think at a smaller venue, if they can keep pounding fairways, these are all very accurate guys with the tee for the most part. If they can keep getting those dominoes to fall, eventually those irons are going to feel real good. And then we know we've got ourselves some good putters that can really, protect themselves from these greens that are quite lethal at times. So even though they're pretty easy to hit, we're gonna want to be careful on them. And I've got a Christian Bezuidenhout outright, and I'm definitely probably going to be playing him at $8,400. I love how he can putt. He's a really good putter on most surfaces, not necessarily even Bermuda. And he's been, gaining some distance lately. So he's going to be dialing it back on this venue for sure. There's absolutely no reason to go out there and trying to hammer it down the fairways like at the Rocket Mortgage last week. So love to see Christian Bezuidenhout on this track, especially with the way his irons have been going. They pop. He either hits them well or he hits them poorly. So if I'm going to get a guy like that and he hits his irons well and continues to have a good putting week, you've seen he can get low at the Byron Nelson and at the John Deere. He got way down in the double-digit birdie range. Then it was fun to see. And then, I'm a big fan of Aaron Wise, Justin Rose, and Davis Riley. All three of those guys at the bottom there, just premier players. And what is Davis Riley doing down there? He's been playing fantastic golf, and then we just have one or two bad rounds, and then all of a sudden the guy's 8K and single figures possibly, and now we're dealing with that nonsense. So I'm going to go to Davis Riley at that percentage as well. I love his upside. I love when you speak of win equity, he's probably going to be one of the first guys between him and Cam Young, I think, that are going to be the Corn Ferry guys to hoist the trophy, which none of them managed to do. Seems though you put out that tweet that all these guys have just been crushing it in the top of the odds board. So hopefully a guy that's not necessarily at the top of the range can get something going this week. And do you have anyone at the bottom of this 8K that you got your eye on, Ron?
Yeah, and I think you made a great point there. Like when you look at the whole 8K range in general, you have so many good Bermuda putters here. And when you get down here a little bit lower, like you said, Bezuidenhout is sixth best Bermuda putter in this field. Yeah. He's got top 20s in 4 of his last 7. And again, you don't need him to win at 8,400. He's probably not going to win. He's just so steady, consistent. He's gaining strokes in each category. So just as in a cash games, as a core play, I think he's a great price there. Even Brian Harman, when you look at his history here, it's all or nothing. He's got a pair of top 6s, and he also has 9 missed cuts. So, that's a bit crazy, very volatile.
That is weird.
Yeah. And, people kind of still flock to him because, he does tend to, I think this is a great course fit for him. He's obviously a shorter hitter. He's got 5 top 10s and 18 starts this year. So he has the ability to pop. And, he's another great play, in my opinion, just from the whole course fit, putting, wedge game. He kind of thrives at these places. I think JT Poston, another great course fit guy. He won here in 2019. He's full of confidence right now. He just won at the John Deere. He was runner-up at Travelers. So the adjustments and the improvement that he's made over the past just a few months, it seems like, another great play there. And then, so you hit on him. Davis Riley is kind of one of my flags that I'm planning here that I'm going to be really strong on.
Nice.
When you look at Detroit, he had one bad hole. Now he's sitting there on Friday. He's 5 under par. He was 4 under for the day. Like, he was rolling. And for some reason on the par 5, he puts up a 9. And I still can't figure out. I haven't seen the highlight or anything. It doesn't make sense to me exactly what happened there. But once that happened, he just went into the tank and never recovered. But yeah, like you said, before these last couple events, like, everybody was all over him. Like, his odds, I got him at 55-1, which is ridiculous to me.
Yeah.
But just his upside alone, and we've seen him play very well down south at Innisbrook. Even on Bermuda greens, he has a high finish at the Sony. And so, I just think he's a guy at single-digit ownership just for his talent level. And another guy we'll get to here in Keith Mitchell, who I think also kind of, just talented for this price range. And so I think Riley is a guy who just makes a lot of sense here as another rebound guy.
Yeah, I totally agree. And before we jump out of this 8K, I just want to mention Justin Rose as well. He is one of the premier proximity guys over the last 24 rounds from 125 to 200, and in my baseline statistics, which he's first. And that's going to be so critical. So if he can just keep himself in the fairway, he's also got a pretty decent track record at this venue, makes a decent amount of birdies. He's around the green game is a bit iffy, but, like you said, the green in regulation stuff at this venue is higher than tour average. So he's not going to be relying on his chipping that much, which is kind of crappy, but he's a really good putter. So he's been putting well lately, and he's done well at this venue before. So I'm going to be eyeing Justin Rose out as well. especially at the bottom of that 8K range. And then we jump into the sevens, where we got a very chalky Mark Hubbard and a Scott Stallings and Keith Mitchell. And then we jump to the middle. We've got a Brendan Todd, Adam Svensson, Harris English towards the bottom. We got some CT Pan action at the bottom there. And then rounds out with some Joel Damon. It's a massive, massive range. It's got some Vince Whaley, so the quality of players falls off quite drastically from the top of this range to the bottom. So you can probably expect that there's a lot of guys that are going to be targeted towards the top of the 7K range, and then a few at the bottom that are kind of outliers. So it's going to be fun if we can find a few guys at the bottom here that can really make a difference for us this week, because like you said, the long shot winners at this venue have been quite frequent, right? I think you said somewhere around
164 to 1 is the average. You've got basically 7 of the last 12 winners have been long shots. But again, that goes against the recent trend of winners or favorites winning. And so it'd be interesting to see if that changes this week at all.
Yeah, it's going to be very peculiar, and it's an interesting week again, especially with this course history thing. It's one of the most stickiest course venues there is. And I think that really gives you an opportunity to really figure out where the public is going to be going with their picks and allow you to pivot off of those accordingly. Now, there's a guy that I think I'm just going to eat the chalk on entirely. It's going to be Scott Stallings. I have no idea what he's doing in the $7,800 range, considering how he's been playing coming into this week. He's been sensational. Over the last 12 rounds, he leads the field in strokes gained total. And his irons are just sizzling. He's just getting better and better as it's approaching to this tournament. And I don't know why people aren't going to be going to him, especially in this price range. So I think at 13-ish%, it's a little steep. But if you put him, for instance, and I know this is a weird way to think about it, but if you put him in with the Denny McCarthys and the Kevin Kisners and the Tom Kims, then the 16, 12%, it's not that different. And I think he should be in that range. So I'm okay eating some Scott Stallings chalk this week. I really, really like how solid he's been playing. Obviously, it's a round of golf. Anything can happen at any moment. Davis can make a 9 on a heartbeat, and he's weak. But Scott's just been playing too good for too long. I think also he's had like top 25s in 4 of his last 5 starts or something ridiculous. So he's just been playing sensational golf. And then Jason Day is another guy that his irons have actually been coming together over the last 2 events. So if you're looking to nibble at anything Jason Day-wise, especially in between Adam Long, Kevin Streelman, Sebastian Munoz, Scott Stallings, he's going to be barely owned. And yet his irons have been trending, and he's a really good putter. So he offers you that upside that we saw at the Wells Fargo. And if his irons are trending in the right direction, I'm going to take a nibble at Jason Day, especially at that low ownership. So there's a whole bunch of players here. Give me some of your favorites around at the top of the sevens, and we'll dive towards the bottom later.
Yeah, this is one of the areas where I'm going to get different. And like you said, you kind of mentioned 2 of the guys already, but Keith Mitchell, he doesn't seem like a great fit for this course, doesn't have great history here. But I think that price is just way too low. So for me, he's more of a value play with talent. You look at some of his recent performances, 18th at the Memorial, 7th in Canada, 6th at the Travelers. So I think him along with Davis Riley are kind of the best 2 talents if we're just looking at overall talent in this range. He definitely has the streakiness with the putter we're looking for. He gained 3.5 strokes putting his last 4 events when you look at how much he's averaging. And so, he's a guy who I'm willing to, if he's coming in around 7% right now, I'm very much willing to double that and play him around 14, 15%. And then Jason Day is another guy. Like you said, when you look at his recent performances, he's another guy I tracked a little bit at the Rocket Mortgage. He was, when you look at across the board, he gained in every area. He's gained 2 straight weeks in approach, like you said. He constantly talks about how he's always working on his swing. Okay, so that the drive is still there. So again, former number 1 player in the world. Yeah. He's had his struggles. Everybody knows that. But, I think he's a guy who, in this price range again, just the win equity, upside that's there. He's a guy that, like you said, I'm willing to, he's coming in 3-4% now. No problem playing him 10-12% and really trying to get an advantage there. Mark Hubbard, I think this is an excellent setup for him. He's another rebound guy who, missed the cut last week. When I was there on Sunday, he was there on the range, working away, working on his swing. Another guy who's kind of shorter off the tee, but he gained strokes off the tee just by his accuracy alone. And, pretty decent course history here with 2 top 25s. So, he's another guy that I would be very comfortable with. And yeah, those are kind of my 3 in this range. And, it'll be a little further down before I get to more guys here. But yeah, Stallings, I totally see what you're saying. I worry a little bit about just off the tee with him. But you're right. When you look at his wedge game, his approach numbers, I mean, they're top 5 in the field. And even Bermuda putting, he's really good on Bermuda. It's his best surface.
Yes.
So yeah, I think he's another great play there for 7,800.
He's a strong, fit guy. He can sizzle a 2-iron 260 if he has to, and just get in the middle of the fairway, especially with how well he's hitting his irons. So he's one of those guys we're going to have to take out of the. If you just to mention to the people watching is like, if you got a guy that's got poor accuracy, go and take a peek at his 250 plus proximity numbers, or go and look at how he plays well on courses under 7,200 yards or something like that. Don't just take accuracy for granted, because in today's modern world, you can have people just bombing it down the fairways, missing fairways, but still putting themselves in good enough places to get onto the green. So those accuracy numbers can be a little bit misleading, especially if the guys hit it quite far. So just, little FYI 101 there. Another 2 guys that I've got Adam Svensson outright. I think he's going to be super chalky at the bottom here at $7,500. He's a very good short course specialist. He's very accurate off the tee. His irons been fantastic, and his putting has been fantastic too lately. So it's going to be interesting to see how he gets it done over the weekend, especially if he's in contention. He typically kind of fades away on a Sunday. But another guy that I might definitely pivot away from Svensson from in a DFS world would be Brendan Todd. He's one of the best putters in the field. He's 3rd on Bermuda putting over the last 50 rounds. And his short game is super tidy, one of the most accurate drivers of the golf ball. And we've seen he can have good stretches of iron play. So that's all we're waiting for. His short game is good enough. His driving at this course is going to be good enough. If his irons show up at $7,500, 6% owned, I'm in. I love a Brendan Todd. He's been playing, just at the Charles Schwab. He's playing fantastic golf, and it's a similar, shorter, tree-lined course. I like that kind of play for Brendan Todd, especially from a comp perspective. And I think he's played okay at this course before. So there's a good course history here, and I think with Svensson right there, he's definitely going to get overlooked a little bit. And then one other guy, 1 or 2 more. Let's get to CT Pan just quickly. Just love what he's been getting up to lately, and I love his proximity numbers from 125 to 200. He's also been putting a lot better lately with a decent course history. And then a very risky-ish play that is going to be one I'm looking forward to getting my hands on is Harris English. Got that upside. He's a proven winner on tour, and he's coming back from injury. So at any minute, that injury can be gone, right? He's probably still battling it, but there's going to be a week where he becomes entirely healthy. And I was looking at his stats over the last few years, and he's typically been a good driver of the ball for the most part, distance-wise. And since, the last few years, the distance has gone down. So he's lost off the tee because of distance and actually picked up in accuracy. So this course could fit into Harris English's hands quite nicely. It's one of the first courses. I think he played quite nicely at the Travelers, but he also putted lights out, which is what you're looking for at a venue like this anyway. So I'm a big fan of Harris English. And then, I've got one more guy way at the bottom that I've got highlighted, and it's Joel Damon. Very accurate driver of the golf ball, likes the shorter golf courses. He's been on No Laying Up podcast saying, I hate rocket mortgages. Why am I even playing those venues? I'm too short. I don't have what it takes. My short game's not nearly good enough to contend at those venues. And we saw at the Wells Fargo when, on day one at least, he was absolutely cooking. When he gets onto shorter courses that require positional play, Joel Damon is an X factor for me. So at 2% owned, I'm in on Joel Damon. Anybody you got your eyes on at the bottom of this 7K before we start getting filthy at the bottom yet, Ron?
So Adam Svensson, you mentioned him. 5 top 25s his last 6. I think he's going to be, and the numbers are showing this. He's going to be a very popular value play once again. He's another guy who's one of the most improved putters on tour. He's gained in 8 of his last 9. He's ball striking. He's positive in 6 of his last 8. So again, that's another kind of good value guy. Alex Smalley, of course, we have the home track narrative here. This is his home course. He's 67th in the FedEx Cup ranking, so he's playing with confidence. He's not, worrying about whether he's going to make it or not. And that's due to, he's got 6 top 16s this year. So he's really coming into his own. His thing, again, he's really good tee to green, really good ball striking. He's just had this cold putter, and he struggled, with the flat stick. But when you look at the history angle here, if anybody knows these greens, it's going to be him.
It's him.
And when he played here in 2019, he gained 4.3 strokes putting. And so, I think he's a guy that's going to be one of my favorite plays down here, just because of that fact alone. For me, when I go down, like you said, Harris English is someone who I was on last week. I think maybe this course fits him a little bit better. It's a little shorter course, where he's not worrying about, driver all the time. And again, he's kind of been really up and down since his return from injury. But, like we talked about, he's another guy with the win equity. And once he finally puts it all together, we remember how good he played last year when he got on that stretch when he was, winning seemingly every other event. JJ Spawn is a guy that I love here as well. He really came on strong over the weekend in Detroit. When you look at the numbers, he's 26th in fairways gained. He's 8th in good drive percentage. He's 25th in approach, and he's 9th in the whole field from that 100 to 175 range. 13th in birdie or better percentage. And so he's another guy who's pretty volatile, but when he's trending up, he kind of keeps it going for a few weeks. And so I think he's a great play. I think Nick Hardy, he's another rebound guy. Missed the cut last week, very surprisingly. He's in kind of another good buy low spot here. The ownership is like literally at 1-2% right now.
Yeah.
Before last week, he had made 8 cuts in a row. He's a guy who, if you like to buy into the motivation FedEx Cup angle, he's 129th in the standings this week. So if that's what you like to look at, maybe he, and again, if I had any predictions here, I would say that, he's going to make the cut, and so I think he's another good value down here. For me, I do like Joel Damon. He's another guy who's really good on these par 70 courses. He's really good on par 4s. I think Doug Gim is really interesting. Obviously, the putting on this Bermuda would be the one thing that takes me off him. But if you're looking at, the ball striking, the fairways gained. But yeah, for me, it's kind of pretty slim down here. Tyler Duncan has been pretty good recently as well at 71. I think kind of the bottom for me, at least in the 7K range, would be Andrew Putnam. He kind of reminds me of Denny McCarthy in a lot of ways. He's just kind of a discounted version. Really good Bermuda putter. He's made 4 straight cuts, and he has 2 top 15s recently. He's another guy who's kind of gaining in every area, and he's really good off the tee. He's 9th in fairways gained. So, I think if you're looking for somebody out here who, is a pretty safe play, I think Andrew Putnam at 7K is a good value.
Yeah, I just highlighted him. I'm definitely going to play him. I like what I see there, especially from a short term and accuracy standpoint. All right, before we get into the cheapest guys on the slate, we have to mention that Betsperts got their tools, articles, the whole shebang out there at betsperts.com. For the rest of the year, it's $1 a month. I think that's a good steal. The schedule just came out yesterday, 2 days ago.
Yep.
And we've got golf for the rest of the year. We've got that fall swing in full effect. So you're going to be getting Betsperts stuff. You're going to get all Ron's course previews, all of the stats breakdowns, all the other guys' picks that are in the golf world on the Betsperts side there, and all the tools that are just getting improved every day. And go take advantage of that. It's $1 a month, and you got that for the rest of the year, which includes that fall swing and the playoffs. So just putting that out there real quick before we go diving into the cheapest, and the dumpster is smelly down here. But I like a few guys, and I'll lead off with Ryan Armour, who I think is going to be one of the chalkier dumpster divers for this area. He's the most accurate driver of the golf ball in this field, according to my model. He's first in the field in accuracy and good drives gained, and he's historically a very good player from 125 to 200. So I really, really like that. And his course history here is actually quite fantastic. So I'm going to be playing quite a lot of Ryan Armour. And then Zach Johnson is another guy that I've kind of got my eye on, he plays very well at the John Deere Classic. And he wasn't playing very well heading into the John Deere this year and made the cut there regardless of his recent form. And since then has actually gained on approach and is going back to a course that he's putted well historically and is a very accurate driver of the golf ball. So love that from Zach Johnson this week. And I've got a few more guys. I've got Chase Seifert, he's a lot better on those tropical kind of courses where you got a lot of water and things like that. But he's a cheap player down here and he's a very accurate driver of the ball. So we're just hoping that the putter can come together. And then another guy that I'm a big fan of is Vaughn Taylor. Same situation, just ball striking machine for the most part, especially down in the $6,400 range. You're going to have to be dealing with some issues, and that's going to come on the short game side of things. But Vaughn Taylor's $6,400. He's not going to be that crazily owned down here, and it's a guy I'm going to be targeting. And then while I was researching, I have a guy that I want to mention. You know that we ditched the green reading books this year. Brian Stewart is one of the guys that absolutely got roasted by that rule. My model loves Brian Stewart, especially at these courses because he's super accurate off the tee, but he's incapable of putting well right now. And I looked at the rest of his career. He's been a positive putter his entire life, and now they took the green reading books away, and he's atrocious. So RIP Brian Stewart. Sorry, the green reading books, did you dirty, but I just figured I'd throw that one out there. And then, I don't really have too many other guys at the bottom. Maybe the new Ryder Cup captain, Luke Donald, could be worth the sprinkle. I don't know how much he's got going on in his life right now, so I don't know where his game's going to be. Maybe all the distractions off the course are going to help him just get away from that, like on the course, like the Rory McIlroy aspect. Who knows? But Ron, talk to me. Who are you taking a banana peel off, and who are you going to be sliding into your lineup?
So yeah, I'm pretty light down here as well. I actually have 4 guys highlighted, and you talked about Ryan Armour, so I won't get into him. But yeah, he really pops in everything from fairways gained, good drive, all those approach putting. So Rory Sabatini. Now, when you look at his game log, and you see, ball striking is pretty bad. He kind of always seems to catch fire with the putter on certain rounds. He was so in Detroit. He has made 2 cuts in a row, but when you look at his course history here, and this is pretty much totally 100% course history play, he has 4 top 10s here in his last 6 appearances. Okay, so not 4 made cuts, 4 top 10s here at Sedgefield for the Wyndham. And so, if you're just going on that alone, which when you get down here, that's not a bad strategy. If you just focus on one thing, even if it's course history, I think you have really great upside for this price for Sabatini. Nick Taylor, and Nick Taylor's another one who I think Taylor is a little better play, and for this reason. So he also has 2 top 10s here in the last 3 years, but this is a little bit better of a course fit for him. He kind of has his best results on these shorter courses. He's more, when you get into a little bit more streaky with his irons, but he's 35th in approach. He's 24th from this 100 to 175 yard range. In his last 4 miscuts, he's barely missed the cut. Like when you look at his numbers, he's, if he's losing stroke, it's like minus 0.2. So he's really close here. And, if you're looking at him as just like kind of one of the last guys into your lineup, I think he's somewhat safe. The last guy I really have, and again, I don't like to take many risks down here. But Doc Redman, he finished 3rd here 2 years ago. He kind of had a really good finish on Sunday in Detroit. He shot 4 under. And when you look at kind of the numbers that matter, this is his best putting surface on Bermuda. He's top 50 in fairways gained, good drive percentage. He's 29th from that 100 to 175 range. And we've always seen that from Doc. He tends to flash that potential, and he's kind of been in a downturn kind of over the past 6 months or so. But, I just think he has the upside that you're looking for. And I will say this, just right next to him, Chad Ramey. We've seen him kind of pop a little bit recently too. He has a very similar profile to Redmond. Not as good of a putter on Bermuda, but yeah, there's not a lot down here that I think you can have much confidence in. Sam Ryder a little bit. I think he's been making some improvements in his game as well. But for me, it's going to be mostly, focusing on that, 7-8K range, and taking those guys that we talked about up top.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's going to be a weird event, and if you can get goofy down at the bottom, feel free to do that. But you can definitely, there's enough chalk to navigate in the upper echelon there to kind of get freaky. And so give me your favorite play above 8.5K, and your favorite play beneath that. I'm going to lead off right away and say I'm all in on Kevin Kisner, especially if his ownership stays like this. $8,700 for me is a really good steal for him, and I could see myself playing at least 50% Kisner in my lineups, and then someone that I fancy down at the bottom is probably going to be Brendan Todd. I'm going to go for those really good putters on Bermuda and just hope that they can just drive it in the fairway and get those irons rolling. So those are my two studs I'm going to be pretty much overweight on for sure.
Yeah, for me, Siwoo Kim for sure. I already saw photos of him on the course this morning, just working away on the putting greens. And again, when you look at his numbers, that's really his only weakness is, he's really not a good putter on Bermuda, even though he has had some success here. So definitely Siwoo Kim. And then, when we get down here, kind of around that 7,500, I think Alex Smalley is going to be a guy who, coming in around 7% right now. So he's a guy I'm going to get a little different with. I think that number ownership will probably rise a little bit here as more people kind of catch wind of, this is his home course if you're playing that narrative, which I usually don't, but I just think his knowledge of the greens and that being his main weakness, I just think that's the tipping point for me to kind of go really overweight with him this week. So those would be my two guys.
Awesome sauce. Yeah, no, I love both of them. I'm definitely going to put those guys in my player pool and see how this week goes. It's going to be fascinating. There's going to be some major chalk that goes down. There's going to be horses for courses that, we're going to have to, it's going to break a leg on the way in, and it's going to happen. So looking forward to it. It's going to be a fun week. Thanks again for an awesome episode, Ron. Really appreciate it. Is it when's the next event after this? Is it the playoffs right away, or is it 2 weeks from here?
No, it goes next week. TBC Southwind, FedEx St. Jude, and so we jump right into the playoffs. At least I'm pretty sure. And one more thing. I know you mentioned the $1 deal. We also are we just put on Betspertsgolf.com a search tool where you can kind of go through whether you want to search Bermuda greens, last 24 events. We're working on that. We're improving that all the time. And so, we encourage everyone to go on there. That's free. Okay. That's not even, you don't even need the $1 for that. So anybody can go on there. And we have some things on there that some of the other sites don't have, where you can actually search by, different course regions. As a course, how do players perform on Northeast courses, Southeast courses? And so if you want to look at, coastal courses, those are already put in there. So that's going to continue to improve over time as we go here, but we welcome any feedback, any suggestions on making that better. And, that's that, and the whole site, we're going to continue to get better over time here. So looking forward to that.
And it's free. I mean, so just go and click, it's no sign up or anything. So that's exciting. So awesome. We'll catch you guys next week, and thanks again for your time, Ron, and we'll be back on Tuesday again. Peace.